read this book a long, long time ago. It's, I think, the first book we did for our Women's Spirituality book group. It's called God's Joyful Surprise by Sue Monk Kidd. It's sort of the first in a 3-book series of hers that talks about her spiritual awakening and her journey. And it's actually fascinating to see her change in theology and language and perspective as she goes through the 3. But this is the beginning of the first one. She says, we seem to have lost touch with the God of surprises. We forget that God is always up to something wondrous and unexpected where you and I are concerned. God taps on our heart's door, waiting for us to open up and discover what God holds for us. If we manage to hear God's knock, sometimes what we find is almost unbearably precious. It turns out to be the one thing we need most in our life, or as my daughter Anne used to say, the onlyest thing. Meaning there is nothing more splendid in the universe.
Today's reading is from Luke chapter 12, verses 35 through 40. Be dressed and ready, and keep your lamps lit. Be like the household staff awaiting the owner's return from a wedding, so that when the owner arrives and knocks, you'll open the door without delay. It will go well with those staff members whom the owner finds wide awake upon returning. I tell you the absolute truth, the owner will put on an apron, seat them at a table, and proceed to wait on them. Should the owner happen to come at midnight or before sunrise and find them prepared, it will go well with them. Understand this. No homeowner who knew when a thief was coming would have let the thief break in. So be on guard. The promised one will come when least expected.
Would you pray with me? Loving God, as we center and ground ourselves in this space, in this moment, help us to let go of the distractions that haunt us. Our worries, our fears, our to-do lists. Help us to be present, to experience this moment instead of jumping ahead to the next. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your grace, your goodness, and your insight. Amen. So I want to begin by talking about the passage in Luke and a little bit about the whole concept of the second coming of Christ. But before I do that, my disclaimer, my standard disclaimer, which is, this is my perspective, and if it works for you, that's great. If there's something you can take home, great, take it home. If not, I don't know, play on your phone or something. Tune me out, look out the window, and just have a nice day. I have never been a big second coming of Christ kind of girl. And I know that for a whole lot of Christians, that's right up there in the top 5 things that you have to believe in order to be a Christian. I told you last week, I'm kind of practical, logical, doesn't make sense to me. Always sounded like wishful thinking on the part of a whole lot of folks who took the Bible a little too literally. Frankly, a whole lot of wishful thinking on the part of those early Christians way back then. So if we look at the concept theologically, we see that it's sort of rooted in the early followers' idea that Jesus was the Messiah, who was going to usher in an era of peace and prosperity. By the end of his life, that hadn't happened. Not much had changed. The people were still oppressed. They were overly taxed. The government could take their land if they wanted to. Poverty was high. The wealthy got wealthier. The poor got poorer. It was good to be in power, whether you were in the Jewish synagogue or you were in the Roman government, it was good to be in power, and they kind of colluded together, were in cahoots together. None of that really changed. And even Jesus' death itself didn't bring about that change. It didn't bring about an end to the world as we knew it. And so the early Christians decided they needed to sort of massage their understanding of what had happened and who Jesus was. And so they developed this concept of a second coming. Well, clearly he's going to come back and finish what he started. So they understood themselves to be living in an in-between time. The in-between time of when he died and when he was going to come again, and finally bring peace and prosperity and an end to suffering and pain and violence. He would bring equality and harmony. All of this would finally happen with that second coming. And many of them were convinced that it was going to happen in their lifetime, that they would literally see Jesus coming out of the clouds, coming back again to use his power to make all of those things happen. Well, time went on, and some of those original folks started to die off without any of that happening, which poses a problem. This new understanding didn't necessarily work either. So Paul addresses this in 1 Thessalonians, written around the year 50. So, 15, 20-ish years after Jesus has died. And remember, lifespan wasn't that long back then. So people are dying, being persecuted. And Paul says, well, okay, if you believed in Jesus, then, and you die, you will be among the first to rise when he returns, and then everybody who's still living will rise up and will meet him in the air. And a lot of folks are still waiting. To me, it sounds like a really great way to control people. Paul was the first one to say, Jesus will come like a thief in the night, right? And you better be awake, and you better be watching, and you better be paying attention, because if you're not, you won't be rewarded. If you're not watching the way, you will not be in heaven with him. It turns into a really great way for the churches to control people. To say, you better be doing good, Sharon. I know about you. You better shape up, honey, because there's a list, and he's checking it twice. And he's going to find out if you're naughty or nice. And if you're not on the right side of that, things are not going to go well for you. So again, this whole concept has really been far from my understanding about God. It's when I hear it come up in conversation, it sort of takes me aback. So I don't know if you guys remember being at the committal for your brother, Shirley, a couple weeks ago, chit-chatting with her sister's pastor about life and death, and he says, well, I plan on living until Jesus comes again. And I looked at him and I said, well, good luck with that. In my outside voice, I'm afraid. And that's fine, but it doesn't make sense to me. There's been a whole lot of people for thousands of years waiting for that. And if we are constantly putting our sights to something in the future, it's just like what I said about, in the prayer a couple minutes ago. If we're constantly looking for something else, we miss right now. We miss God in the present. So I still think there's a message for us in these passages. Luke and Matthew and some of the others picked up on what Paul started to say, and on this metaphor of Jesus coming like a thief in the night. They continue to use it. So we find ourselves in Luke around the year 80. And Luke's now expanded upon this concept and gives us the parable of the homeowner. And it's like all of you are staff. and you're waiting for the homeowner to come home from a party and you're not sure what they're going to need. Maybe they'll need a cup of tea, maybe they're going to need some Alka-Seltzer, maybe they're going to need to be tucked into bed, I don't know. But you better be waiting for them, and if you are, well, then your homeowner is going to reward you because you were there and present. But you know, if they come home and they pass out on the hallway floor and they're still there in the morning, they're not going to be happy with you. So be ready and waiting. And again, Luke says, the promised one, aka Jesus, comes like a thief in the night. And who of us, if we knew somebody was going to break into our house, I don't know how many of you had your house broken into, it's happened to me, if we'd known, would have been there, right? Wouldn't have happened. Same thing. That image, that concept, that we need to be awake and paying attention, spiritually awake, paying attention. So what do we do with all of that metaphorically? If, in my opinion, we're not going to see Jesus coming out of the clouds anytime soon, what do we do with that metaphorically? Anything come to mind? How do we make sense of it? Because there's got to be a deeper than literal meaning here for us, or we have to just write it off. So one of the parts of that Scripture says to keep our lamps lit. So the inside lamp, to keep our heart lit, to keep it alive and full of joy and full of hope and love and compassion and giving, to not let that dim or to not cover that up, to be ready when that's needed, to be open enough to feel God's nudgings, to feel the Spirit move and encourage us to act in ways that are helpful and compassionate and caring. Anything else? I mean, to me it also speaks just about mindfulness. To be prepared spiritually so that we walk through this life aware of God in every moment, everywhere around us. To not simply say, well, God's not here because Jesus isn't coming for a long time. But to say, no, God's here in me, in you, in everything around us. And so if I pay attention, how do I see that? Sumon Kid says we've forgotten about the God of surprises. We've forgotten that we can't expect what God is going to do, but we should expect the unexpected. For God to show up when we least expect it, in the most odd and unusual of places, and to be open for that to happen. And she talks about her own life at the beginning of this, and sort of what started her on this journey. She was young, had 2 little kids, like one must have been school age and one was younger, like 2. And all of a sudden she found herself having chest pains and a racing heart. And being a good nurse, she took herself to the doctor. They ran all kinds of tests and found nothing. And the doctor finally looked at her and said, so, Sue, you got any stress in your life? She said, well, yeah, nothing that other people don't have, I got 2 little kids, I work 3 nights a week as a nurse, I'm writing 2 hours a day because I really want to be a writer. This is before she was a writer. She said, let's see, I'm a soccer mom, I'm a P on the PTA, I'm a class grade mom, I volunteer a lot because I don't know how to say no. I'm the program coordinator of the Writers Guild, I'm on all these committees in church. No, absolutely not. No stress. She goes on to talk about how she wanted to be the perfect mother and the perfect wife and the perfect Christian. So no stress at all. It's amazing that those little blue tranquilizer pills work really well at keeping that heart rate down and the chest pains away. Sent her on a journey of trying to figure out what was going on. and what was important. And one of the things she did then was take herself on a silent retreat that with her church that her pastor was leading. And on those retreats, typically you're silent except for meeting with a spiritual director or pastor like once a day. And so when she met with her pastor, he said, "So are you listening for God while you're here?" She said, what do you mean, am I listening for God? How do you do that? He said, well, basically it means you try not to talk. That you quell the desire to want to demand anything from God, ask anything from God, tell God all kinds of things, that you calm your inner self and you simply listen. That you attend to the presence of God with sensitivity. I love that phrase, to attend to the presence of God with sensitivity. She said, well, what does that mean? Sensitivity. And he said, you need to listen with your heart. You need to listen in a way that you are paying attention with all of your being, to this, with your senses, to the sights and sounds and thoughts and experiences all around you, to understand that there can be a message from the divine in all of those things. He said, but the most important part about listening with sensitivity is that you have to be willing to risk being changed. You have to risk your vision being changed. He said it's dangerous business, listening to God. Mark Nepo tells a story that he heard from a grown-up man about when this man was a boy. And when he was young, he pulled a pot of boiling water off the stove and had third-degree burns on his stomach, which meant he had to heal. He had to be still for months, which for anybody is no fun, but for a young boy is especially no fun. But he said as he looks back, he realizes that because he was forced to be still, more and more he got in touch with his inner self, his deeper self. And it emerged from within that he was meant to be a painter. He said, absolutely, he would prefer never to have been burned, but he's conscious of the fact that it was through that experience and that time to deeper his relationship with himself and to open himself to the divine within, that he found his true life's calling and vocation. Being still is difficult. Just the 1 minute that we sit to be still and to be quiet, I catch a whole lot of you standing there looking at your bulletins or, not here. Just 30 seconds of being present and listening and letting go of what's in our minds. There's a gentleman who was a Zen monk and practiced meditation in Korea and Japan. And he finally set up so that he could go to Thailand and meditate in the forest, having an attendant bringing him food so that this would be like the next great meditation experience for him to deepen that meditation practice. And it was great. It was all set up and he got to the Thai forest and it was wonderful, all except for the chickens. Because there were chickens, wild chickens everywhere in the forest whose only occupation in life was to run around squawking all day. And I think that's sort of like life, don't you? We could try and go mindfully through life, but there are these wild chickens running around screeching all the time. How are you supposed to hear your inner sense, deepen your relationship with the divine when there are these wild chickens running around everywhere? But that's the
challenge. And perhaps it's also the message. Maybe there are messages in those wild chickens that if we could listen and attend to them with sensitivity, we might hear the message. Mark Nepo also talks about unplanned unfoldings. He said, we try and plan, and we try and structure our life, and we try and, get all of our ducks in a row and get rid of all those chickens and make sure everything's going to go right. And then something unexpected touches us. He said, maybe it's like the blind saxophonist he heard in the alley in Greenwich Village that he stood and listened to until he wept. Or maybe it was like the bird trapped in the Duomo in Florence, the big dome. He said that spoke to him of his own entrapment. That pastor of Sumac kids talked about the same sorts of things when he talked about listening with sensitivity. He said, what does the crotchety old guy feeding the pigeons have to say to you? Or the child skipping along the sidewalk? What do those little things have to say to you? Your unwillingness to forgive, or your inclination to call a friend. Those are messages that we need to attend to with sensitivity, to listen to the divine. So I know we all really like that age of peace and harmony and justice and equality and all of those great things to be ushered in. And we can hope that that's someday going to happen. But personally, I think that the second and the third and the fourth and the 100th and the thousandth, I'll say that 3 times fast, and the millionth, and gosh knows how many second comings have already come and gone. That we could see the face of God, the face of Jesus in every other person who has ever existed, in every flower, in every bird, in every blade of grass, in every leaf on a tree, in everything, in all of the silent messages within us and outside of us that we are called to attend to. God comes again and again and again, and if we would listen with sensitivity and follow, we will usher in that world of peace and justice and harmony and love and compassion. So stay awake and watch.